hopping on a minute early so that I can get my stuff together and you guys can pop on here as well. So give me 1 second. Good morning for those of you that are tuning in. Thank you for your patience. Here we are this beautiful October morning, and it is going, honestly, the weather is cooling down a lot, which is very nice. But yeah, we're just like logging on a minute early just to give people the chance to hop on. We'll start officially at 8:30. I hope everybody is having a good morning so far. We are well into October, so Halloween is coming along, which is very exciting for those of you that enjoy spooky season. I enjoy it. And we are also at the tail end of migration too, so hopefully you guys have had a lot of fun checking out migration as well. All right, I see some people logging on, so my efforts are not in vain. Perfect. Okay, so we're at 8:30, so I'm just going to kind of roll along there as well too. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord, and today we will be talking about crows, because what better bird to talk about than the crows during October spooky season? These birds are often associated with ill omens or sometimes to be very frustrating, and I find that their fan base is pleasantly split down the middle, with those that find crows very curious and interesting, and other people that want absolutely nothing to do with them. So we're gonna I see it's not in vain. Perfect. So these guys honestly are a lot of fun. They have so much to offer. We're going to be talking a lot about a lot of different things. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments, and we're just going to jump right into it, guys. Let's go for it. So to get the fun stuff out of the way first, these guys are actually still in the order Passeriformes. So perching songbirds, similar to like cardinals and chickadees. Crows are actually some of the largest birds. Ravens too are some of the larger birds of Passeriformes. More specifically, these guys are in family Corvidae. One of my favorites. These intelligent birds include crows, ravens, jays, magpies, and jackdaws. We don't have all of them here in North America, but they are a lot of fun to talk about too. For this presentation specifically, we're going to be talking a lot about the American crow, a few other species of crows, and occasionally hit on the common raven as well too. So oh my goodness, let's give it a second because the words are not coming out right for me today. But in regards to the map, we're going to be focusing more on the American crow, right? So these guys have a very large range throughout North America. They cover most of the US, and in the summertime right here is when they move up into Canada, more of it. The purple range is their year-round range, so we can find them at any time in the year through that point. And then in this blue patch right here, that is in their wintering range. So as things start to cool down, they actually hit the southwest just a little bit more as well too. Of course, with the range that you see that they cover, you could tell these birds are quite adaptable. So they're very commonly found in cities and urban areas, and they can be found a lot in open landscapes with a few trees. You're not going to find them in super heavily wooded areas as much. Some fun facts is the oldest recorded American crow on date, so the oldest wild American crow was found to be 17 years and 5 months old, while in captivity, the oldest crow was 59 years old. And in captivity, usually these are crows that are with wildlife rehabilitators that act as ambassadors to help teach others about their species and things like that as well too. So there's quite the range there. Oftentimes you're going to be closer to like 5 years to 10 years old on average, depending on how well the crow does and how lucky they are as well too. So when it comes to identification, a lot of people know crows as a large black bird, but let's keep in mind that there is a whole family of blackbirds. So sometimes that can get a little confusing for sure. But I like to think these guys are like the original blackbird that a lot of people think of. They are pretty large in comparison. So that is something that gives them away pretty quickly, but they do have slight glossy feathers, nothing like the iridescence of a common grackle, which people do often confuse them with. These birds do have more of a sleek black color. Their beak is definitely on the thicker side, but it is a little bit more straight compared to like a grackle that it goes a little bit more curved there as well too. When in flight, these guys have large slotted feathers on the primary, so you'd see there's a lot of space right there. And when it comes to their tail, it's actually it's on the shorter end, and it's more of a square size. This is going to come in handy in a second. When it comes to their ID as well, everybody knows what a crow sounds like, whether it's from a movie or a video game, or if it's just from going outside. They sound something like this. It's that standard caw that everybody knows well enough. Definitely has like that, not spooky connotation, but everybody associates it with something not always good. But that is the standard call of the crow. It does vary with individual, so they will have either a different pitch or a slightly different style. So crows can recognize each other depending on what their call sounds like. So it does vary with individual. But not only that, they have quite the repertoire. So they can also make coos, rattles, and clicks. So here's another one that someone was able to record, which is awesome, of that rattling kind of sound. And hopefully you guys can hear that okay. But basically, yeah, it's a very subtle rattle for sure with this one. And it's really fun to hear the different types of styles. Not only that, but crows in general, and actually a lot of corvidae in general, is fantastic at mimicry. So depending on what they feel is helpful or important or what they're exposed to, they can mimic a variety of things, such as barred owls, geese, other animals, depending on, again, if you have a crow that is either in captivity with a wildlife rehabber as an ambassador, or if they're exposed to certain things, they can also sound like humans and copy certain phrases, and they also can sound like dogs or other things like that as well too. So definitely a wide variety of calls. Now, in regards to different birds in our areas that look similar to crows, very specifically, like we're not talking about the grackles over here, we do have another species of crow in North Carolina called the fish crow. The fish crow is only found on the coastal part of North Carolina, so you're not really going to see him where a lot of us are in the Piedmont area. And then, of course, the common raven. Common ravens are more common out west, although we do have a population of them in the Appalachian Mountains. So it is possible sometimes to see them pass through the Piedmont area, but it's not specifically common as well too. But I like to say, depending on where you're going, it's good to know that these are things to consider. The fish crow is very similar to the American crow. They have a very similar stature and build. The only difference is the fish crow is a little bit smaller, which is not always easy to see when you don't have them compared side by side. Let's consider the downy and the hairy woodpecker. It's hard to keep track if you're not used to figuring out the differences there without comparing them directly. So one thing that is very helpful is that the fish crow has a different type of call. It's high-pitched and a little bit more nasally, and it sounds something like this. And hopefully you guys are hearing all these correctly. I tried to adjust it so it's not blaring the calls right in front of your face, but I'm not seeing any comments saying you can't hear it, so I'm going to assume we're good to go. So that is an easy way to determine the fish crow if you have the chance to listen to their calls. And with the common raven, they have quite the repertoire as well. A lot of people have deduced that common ravens have at least 20 calls with very specific meanings as well. I'm not going to go into those meanings. But basically they've got a wide range of communication with other ravens as well. So when it comes to these different types of calls, we've got 3 different kinds that I'm going to point out, one of which is the standard caw. Now, in comparison to the crows, this one is much deeper as well too, right? So if you listen to this. That is the wrong call. That's the second one. That ruined the surprise. I lied. Let's listen to this one. It's more of a honking noise, pretty much. So it's still that kind of caw, but it's a little bit more rasping and a little bit lower as well, too. So we're going to do that one more time. And then with, let's see, there's 2 other calls, and I see there's a question. And then, of course, like that one I mentioned before, this one can definitely scare the daylights out of someone if they're not paying attention. These are some of the variety of calls they have. Which is like that subtle scream there, which is an interesting choice. because I want to ruin your morning with lots of yelling. And then lastly, this one is really fun. They do also make a variety of like gurgling sounds or knocking sounds, which can do something like this. So they also have quite the repertoire, which is very interesting to pay attention to as well. Let's see. Okay, so Jeff Doyle asked, what is the biggest species of crow? And actually, I'm not too sure. I would have to double check. In comparison, the most I know right now is in between crows and ravens. Ravens are sometimes like 2 times the size of crows, and they are much larger. In regards to the pictures here between like your fish crow and your common raven, common ravens have a thicker, heavy-set bill, and a lot of the feathers over the top of the bill do go farther down compared to the crows where it stops a little bit earlier as well too. Not only that, but common ravens do have a lot of feathers around the throat as well that are usually pretty distinct in comparison. So I will actually have to look that up and let you know the answer later as to what the biggest species of crow is. So I will definitely keep that in mind. Thank you. That's a good question, though. I appreciate that. So one of the best things about corvidae in general is that these birds are extremely intelligent. And there's another question, are all crows black? Yes, they are. There are, so like some ravens do have some different colorations, like there is, oh my goodness, I'm gonna get this wrong. I think it's a white-naped raven. I would have to double check, but overall crows do have that similar, the black feathers as well too. So with Corvidae in general, these guys are very smart. There's a lot of neurons firing up in that brain, so they are able to adapt, improvise, and overcome quite well, which is really fun. There is a species of crow called the New Caledonian crow, which utilizes a lot of different tools. So that is very interesting as well. These birds are one of the few known to do so, where they'll actually use hooked twigs and leaves to get at certain foods as well, which is really fun. And they are known to also drop shellfish on hard surfaces to crack it open as well too. Some of you may have heard similar stories where birds will drop nuts basically somewhere like in a intersection in a oh my goodness, in a road, so that when cars eventually go over them, they can take the nut that's inside as well. So other examples as well too, which are really fun, of these kinds of tests in more captivity settings, just to show how how these birds can function, is that in an experiment with ravens, researchers basically hung a piece of food from a piece of string. And a lot of birds will half the time will kind of fly down and try and nab the food as they're flying. But ravens were able to think of the process to pull up the string, loop it between their foot, and keep pulling up until they could access the food. In another experiment with crows, with determining basically, oh my goodness, in order to determine water displacement, they had a tube filled with water with a piece of food floating on the top. But it was just far enough that the crow couldn't reach the food on the inside of the tube. So with rocks that were nearby, the crows were able to drop rocks in the water, which raised the piece of food high enough until they can access it as well too. Another thing as well is crows are very good at recognizing faces as well. So in an experiment done with researchers wearing masks, they basically associated one mask with really bad things, told their friends, the crows did, and so anytime this person came around wearing that mask, the crows alerted the others in the area saying, hey, this guy, we don't like this guy at all. Let them know as well too. You guys are having such a good conversation in the chat. Thank you so much for kind of filling in some of the blanks that I don't have. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm seeing some people have noticed that their birds throw like walnuts and things on the road to get that done as well too. So basically, if you're curious about more of these experiments that have occurred, definitely just do a YouTube search on like crow intelligence tests or things like that, because it's really amazing to see what these birds will do in order to overcome a situation as well. So just some other things that are really fun when it comes to certain behaviors. This one is going to be more towards ravens, but both can do this, is they have no problem pestering predators at different types of food sites. So this is actually a video of a common raven, or a few, pestering a bald eagle. And the reason that they pester is because they're determining the threat level of the predator in the area. So they're seeing how much they can get away with in order to access any of the food that's nearby. And it's really an interesting, funny behavior to watch because not many would have the audacity, I feel. Let's see. There is a question about whether or not crows can swim. It really depends. Birds in general can swim a little bit. It's definitely not something that they're great at. So depending on the strength of the bird and the wing size, it's a little bit difficult for sure. And then let's see. Somebody asked how to attract crows to your yard. We'll be talking about that a bit later as well too. So as you can see, this is quite an interesting video, and you can also determine the size of ravens in comparison to eagles as well. We know eagles are very large birds, so you could see that ravens themselves are quite large. Crows are a bit smaller on that scale as well too. In regards to other behaviors, which other birds can do, I think it's just always fun to point out, is crows also partake in anting, which is a process where they'll basically find a anthill, they'll kind of ruffle them up and kind of cause a huge mess, and they'll basically lay near or on the anthill. And what'll happen is that the ants will basically climb on the feathers, and they sometimes help take care of any parasites, but they do also, with the chemicals that ants release, they do also cause a soothing kind of sensation for any itchiness or irritation that could be occurring on the bird. So if you ever see a bird lying in an anthill, it very well could be that behavior as well. This posture also looks very similar to sunbathing, in both situations, and can look pretty alarming. But overall, sometimes it's just them performing that style of behavior. These birds do also specialize in dunking their food in water, so if you have a bird bath and find a very unsuspecting food item in there, very well could be your local crows or some other birds that are taking advantage of soaking up the food at first as well too. Now, some of my favorite things about crows is their social behavior. Crows in general, like a group of crows, is called a murder, and a group of ravens is called an unkindness. The reason for this is because people used to think that crows would hold trial for one of their other for one of the other birds in the murder and basically decide whether or not to throw them out. There's also been the association that crows hold funerals, so that if one of the birds in the murder has passed, the other crows would basically kind of mourn that. But really what was happening in there was a murder investigation. Half the time when there is a individual crow that has passed in a murder, the other birds in the area will investigate the scene to figure out how that crow has passed away. Remember, these birds are extremely adaptable. So they're going to be looking for any signs to say, hey, this is what we should avoid because that's what happened to that guy. So they're very good at holding murder investigations as well. But usually murders consist of, especially in the nesting season, the parents and their offspring from previous years. So you can have a smaller murder from 5 to 7, or you can have up to 10 to 20, or even more than that. In times when they are not nesting, they do often have communal roosts, and they do grow quite large during non-breeding season. Let's see. There's a question about, do crows attack humans? You guys are like on it. I love this. Thank you so much. They don't often do it. Yeah, they will protect their babies, or again, if somebody has, like, this is in like extreme situations. If somebody has really pestered like a specific group of crows, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd make like some kind of sassy comments as those people approach, but overall they are not seen often attacking humans or anything like that. Just in regards to nesting, I would say would be the biggest concern. So these birds do have very communal roosting points as well. So in times of like winter or non-breeding, you have scenes that can look like this. This is based in Orange County, California, and you just have large flocks of crows that just kind of pass back and forth through the area, which is absolutely impressive to watch. So it is definitely quite the behavior to witness. And again, this is more common during certain times of year than others as they pass through. So definitely seeing that is always interesting. Somebody asked if they can gang up, which is fantastic because I'm about to talk about that. Crows are often very commonly found mobbing and also being mobbed. These birds both start and help instigate, really, certain mobbing behaviors. Now, mobbing is something that any species of bird can do. Basically, it's when birds recognize that there is a predator or a threat in the territory. They will basically push and call and antagonize that bird or threat until it moves out of the area. So it is always a fun time like that too. So here's a really good example of a picture of some crows pushing out a red-tailed hawk in the area. And here's a slightly different view of what that can sometimes look like. This is a great horned owl, and there is a crow nagging right in the background, but from what I'm used to, owls don't really care that much, so this crow will probably alarm a few times because that is a predator in the area before realizing that nobody's doing anything about it, and will probably just leave. So definitely very interesting behaviors can be seen with mobbing, and don't let crows fool you. They can also be mobbed out of an area because crows are large enough and they have a diet that does include certain like songbird eggs and things like that. So other smaller songbirds like red-winged blackbirds, mockingbirds will see crows as a threat and also try to push them out of an area if they feel that that is a concern as well too. So when it comes to diet, I did mention a little bit about their that they do sometimes eat like songbird eggs and things like that, but these birds are really omnivorous, so they're going to be taking advantage of both like insects, reptiles, amphibians, and also crops, seed, fruit, discarded food in the trash because they can. They're very adaptable, and they do occasionally, they are often found sometimes at like roadkill or carrion, but actually something that's interesting is because of their beak style, while it is a larger beak, it's not super sharp like a vulture's. So they can't open this meat on their own. They have to wait for another animal that is coming by to eat the food to tear it open before they can partake. So that's not really made for them, but they do use circumstances to access it, which is really interesting. These birds are also ground feeders. Their feet and their legs are very sturdy and very scaly, so it gives them great support as they're constantly walking around. They do have a tendency to flick debris, and because of that kind of their size and that heavier bill, they're able to tilt over large rocks or objects to look for more food. And as we've talked about a little bit, these birds will definitely drop larger items from a high distance to crack them open, and they'll also hold the food item with their feet and hammer into it to get that food on the inside as well. Let's see. Okay, so when it comes to nesting season, which of course is usually in the summertime, March through August, depending on what's going on, these birds are monogamous, so they usually stay with the same partner through the nesting season. Sometimes they will occasionally mate with another crow, but they usually stay with the same partner. And when they're picking a nest site together, they're usually going to pick the higher portions of the tree closer to the trunk or on larger limbs, because again, these are larger birds. They're going to need a little bit more support. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I will definitely answer some of these questions after the presentation. You guys have been so awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So, oh my goodness, hold on. Getting back to it. Okay, both the male and the female crow will work on building the nest together. The female is usually the one that fine-tunes the nest lining with like grass and plant stems, but both of them will work together to make the outer portion of the nest with twigs and larger branches. Now, remember how I said a murder often, at least like on the smaller scale, contains like the parents and their offspring from previous years. So those offspring from previous years often help bring material over for the nest. So they'll just kind of leave things like twigs and things and drop it off, or they'll also build their own practice nest as well too, because they're not nesting that year, they're still learning. So that's a great behavior to kind of help with those instincts, because something that's very fun about birds in general is that there's a mix of instinctual knowledge that they know since they were born, and there's also learned knowledge. So practice makes perfect, and figuring out the best way, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as well too. It takes anywhere from 6 to 16 days to building a nest, depending on how much help they have and what's going on as well. So when it comes to nesting, these birds usually just have one brood. If something happens to the first brood, they can have a second one, but each brood mainly contains about 3 to 7 eggs as well too. Incubation, so the amount of time that they are on the eggs, takes anywhere from 16 to 18 days, and it does start when they oh my goodness, when the first egg is laid. So these birds do have asynchronous hatching, which basically can be found a lot in your hawks or owls. And asynchronous hatching is basically when one egg hatches, the next egg won't hatch for another day or two later. Same thing happens, it's the opposite for a lot of other songbirds where all of their eggs will hatch at the same time. So those are two different strategies. Asynchronous hatching basically makes it so that it's easier to consolidate food resources and there's better chances of survival for certain offspring in case something happens and resources are not what they thought them to be. But after those 16 to 18 days, all the eggs have hatched. The nesting period that it takes for these birds to be able to fledge is anywhere from 20 to 40 days. So something to consider is the fact that with your bluebirds, if you have like a nest box or anything, it takes 2 weeks to incubate and then 2 weeks to fledge, right? So at this point, it takes about 4 weeks total. So incubation for crows is about 2.5 weeks, and then for nesting, you're getting close to a little under or over a month, depending on circumstances. So they have a much longer nesting period as well. When they do hatch, they are ultra young, so they do require a lot on the parents' care, and they continue to do that for quite a while. So the juveniles will depend on the parents 2 to 3 weeks after fledging. When they do fledge, the crows will usually leave like food out on a branch to kind of help them out of the nest as well too. And feedings honestly may continue for 1 to 2 months after they fledge. And after that, they may still beg because they can. But at that point, the parents are like, you know how to eat, you'll figure it out, it's all good. But they definitely do have a longer time frame that they require the parents' care. With juvenile crows, when they do fledge, you're going to notice a few things that are a bit different because they haven't gotten all of their adult plumage in. They do have light blue eyes that do adjust as they get older. Their mouths are still a little bit more pink because if we go back, we do see that they do start out pink and they do start to darken over time. The adults don't have this little kind of pink nub right on the end. They do get more they get harder as they get older, and it's one of those things where the pink starts to go away, right? And then, kind of how we mentioned earlier, these birds actually don't nest until their second spring. So, with a lot of birds that take a lot more care or their growth is slower, it takes more time for them to fully mature as well too. So it's one of those things where it takes more time, and so that's why when they're with the parents, they'll kind of work a little bit harder at like those false nests and things like that because it's all very good practice. Let's see, and we hopefully will have questions. I got a little bit more time, so bear with me on that. Thank you. When it comes to attracting crows, it's one of those things where you do have to check if they're in the area. You do have to have a more open area with some trees, so keep an ear out for them. You could also have them during certain times of year. Obviously, we are in their year-round range, but you know, sometimes you can have them more in your location, in your yard during the summer or the winter. Really, it depends. You never know for certain on them. You could also have them at a local park or things like that, so you could kind of check that out. So let's see, excuse me, sorry. You want to have a more open area. If you do have crows in the yard, they are much larger. So having a feeder, like a platform or a tray feeder, is going to be something that suits them best. You can also do something more similar to a ground feeder, but you do just want to make sure the food stays fresh and doesn't mold or anything like that as well. Some basic go-to items that are really good starter points are like peanuts, sunflower, or corn. Whole peanuts are great because they do cache those, which is a lot of fun. So they'll kind of take those and go, which is a very nice time. And again, because they're omnivorous, we can focus on a few different options as well. Mealworms are great if you wanted to do like a suet nugget or like bark butter bits. Those are a great option that's easy for them to take and go as well. And fruit can still be harder. You could do dried fruit if you wanted. Fresh fruit you want to make sure it doesn't ferment or grow moldy. That's just an option. You can kind of try that as you've kind of offered other options to your crows. And then if you've got, and yeah, you could do worms if you wanted. Right. Okay, this is great. Yeah, not salted peanuts, raw or roasted. Go with unsalted, because if you have any salted foods, that can cause birds to dehydrate, and it causes a whole nother slew of problems. So make sure these are just regular raw or roasted peanuts. That's a great note. Thank you for putting that in there. And if you do happen to have your crows and you just want to offer them something fun, you can also offer egg, like chicken egg, and you can actually scramble that up or do like hard boiled as well and offer that too. But for the most part, starting out with something like peanuts, sunflower, or corn are very good starter options, and then you can always add little extra things later as you find that you've gotten the crow's attention as well too. So those are all kind of good options there. If you are, I would probably stay away from cheese. Okay, so obviously crows, if they're in the city, they will go for like pretty much anything. So I'm not saying they can't eat cheese, but we probably just want to stay with certain types of food, depending on what the cheese has in it. We don't want to offer too many things out of range. So I would probably err on the side of caution for that one. So for those of you that are in the area and are looking to go shopping today, I do have a code for $5 off of a $25 purchase or more. The coupon code is CROW, only available today, either in-store or through phone order. There will also be a second viewing of this presentation in-store at 11 a.m. in case you know anybody nearby that would like to stop by. Okay, so I cannot guarantee that I know incredibly a lot about the intelligent aspect on things. So give me 1 second to kind of work through. And then also, let's see. These are my references as well too. A lot of the pictures and the video came from the Macaulay Library, which basically anybody that's got recordings or audio recordings or photographs will kind of upload their images to this, the resource library, which is a fantastic thing to check out. Favorite books, okay, let's see. What is your favorite book about crows? I don't think I have a favorite book specifically about crows, but a lot of the information that I got to for this presentation today includes two different things. There's the Sibley Guide to Bird Life and Behavior, which is really interesting, and it covers a lot of different birds from, it covers every single different bird, gives really good information about their general behaviors, and then a online resource called Birds of the World is a website that it does require a subscription to, but it has a lot of really good scientific information from pretty much any bird around the world. So I highly recommend that as well. So those are both resources that I use that have been really good as well too. Somebody said to Google a TED Talk about crows, so I don't know if that's got some good information for anybody to check out as well. Let's see. Is it true that crows are more intelligent than chimpanzees? I'm not super certain, but it is one of those things where crows have been shown to use tools similar to chimpanzees. So if one is not smarter than the other, then they are very close, just with the way that how they navigate things and that they're able to learn and advance stuff. I've also heard that crows have regional dialects. I believe this to be true. Okay, I love regional dialects. Okay, if you go to allaboutbirds.org, which is one of the ones that has a compilation of some of those audio recordings, it shows different calls from different parts of the world. So, okay, so even for like the United States, we can have a bird like a chipping sparrow or like the dark-eyed junco. We have dark-eyed juncos on the East Coast and we have dark-eyed juncos on the West Coast, and they have different twangs to how they sound, which is really interesting. So regional dialects are definitely a thing. Sometimes it's very subtle, but I find it really, really exciting, which is very awesome as well too. Chocolate, I'm gonna say I do not recommend chocolate for any wildlife in general, just because I have dogs. I don't recommend it for my dogs. I wouldn't recommend it for other things in general. Plus, if you do sweets, please consider you're going to be attracting ants or other things that you may not like as well. Let's see. I am not sure about which is the loudest crow. I would have to double check that as well. Simon asked, why do crows always get a bad rep? So honestly, with crows, it's really it's so interesting because if you look back on this, there's a few different reasons. Religiously and folklore, there's a lot of negative connotations. The crow's black feathers were often seen as an ill omen for a lot of different things. And then, what is it? In certain cases, if there was a battlefield or something that happened, you would have a lot of ravens or crows that would be in the aftermath, because that is a location for carrion and things like that they could possibly eat. So those are a few different regions as well. Plus, let's consider now with Halloween too, and especially in spooky movies and stuff, the caw that crows make and that scream that the raven did earlier, more than I probably should have played it, were also like kind of spooky sounds. So it is one of those things that kind of associate that reputation as well. Somebody said, I wish you'd write a book on them. I don't think I'm near anywhere as qualified, but I'm glad you found the presentation interesting for that as well, too. And lastly, just as well, if anybody was paying attention to the presentation banner on the Facebook page, the picture was a da-da-da-da common raven, because that's the only one I could post. But basically, with this picture, you could tell that the beak is much larger, and a lot of the bristles kind of go well past like half of the oh my goodness, half the bill as well too. It's one of those things where, again, it is really hard to see if you're not sure what to look for in the difference between oh my goodness, your crows and your ravens. And then I really don't know about biscuits. Again, you got to worry about the sweets that a lot of these birds, again, are not great with. I am one of those people where I focus on the more natural stuff you can go with, the better, because you're not inviting too much else into the situation. If you have crows in your area and you want to offer them like fun treats, I would still stick to things that are a little bit more natural. So like with the egg, I mentioned that as well too. Some people do the mealworms, or they'll do other types of insects as well. I try and stay away from anything that possibly yeah, biscuits are honestly, there's too many things in them that could possibly harm the birds. So I like to stick with things that we know work well for most of our songbirds, and other things as well too. I'm not going to recommend too much outside of that as well. So with that being said, I think that's kind of where I'll stop. Okay, someone said somebody said last one with pastas. I would stick with just seed, anything with proteins or fats that are more natural based. So peanuts, sunflower, you can do the mealworms, you can do fruit because that's got natural sugars in it, no additives, things like that. The peanuts have to be raw or roasted, not unsalted. And then what is it? You can do that egg or something like that. Which are also very good options as well. But I would not deviate from a range of more like, oh my goodness, I can't think of the word, manufactured food items probably as well too. And the last comment is nice. It's so nice to hear someone talking about crows who actually likes them. Most people are weird. I love crows, honestly. They're a lot of fun. They're very curious, very intriguing. I can see some people having issues with them because they do sometimes go after grains. So if you are in the more agricultural section of things, it can be difficult. Crows can be found worldwide except for Antarctica as well too. So there's different types of species, and they all might look a little bit different. But yes, you can find them in quite a few different locations as well. Okay, with that, I'll probably log off. If you guys have any more questions, I will be sure to answer them as we go on. But I hope you have a great day and a great spooky season. Enjoy the rest of your October, and thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you did too. So with that, I will see you next time, and enjoy your birds. Thanks. Bye.